Today's episode is quite an interesting one, and I say that almost about all my episodes, but this one's particularly one is definitely an interesting one because it's going to be a very good conversation with a an empowerment coach. So, as you guys know, I'm as no secret that I like to dive into the life of an expat and the experiences of an expat. I've done various episodes on that in the past, all the way about the chronicles of this promised land that we consider the United States or North America. um you know um Working here, living here, all sorts of things. I've discussed that with my friends who have shared that same journey as I have, or similar journey as I have. So those discussions were mainly from a drawing room expert's perspective, as this whole podcast is about that mostly. But every now and then we do invite an actual expert to talk about these things. And in this episode, I have Ms. Zarina Tariq, who's going to be joining us. And you're going to be listening and hopefully benefiting from this conversation. She is an empowerment coach. She has more than 3 years of experience, supporting a lot of clients here in North America predominantly. She comes from an expat background herself, so she um, definitely understands the challenges and the perspective of that. She is a clinical hypnotherapist, a certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, and also dives into cognitive behavior as well, which is something that I'm particularly interested in. So all in all, a very a capable guest on the podcast. Hope you benefit from this conversation. If you're interested in booking a conversation, a session with Zarina, I'll be tagging her socials and her website in the description as well. So feel free to go to our website, check her out. If that's something you want to explore and really work on yourself, I think self empowerment is also something that is a an ongoing conversation these days. So I think it will be of great benefit whoever's listening and interested in self development. So hope you guys enjoy the episode. Feel free to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and the whole lot. Enjoy. But as I was thinking about this, and I was getting excited about this episode particularly, um, what I went back to was why I am doing these podcasts, these episodes, and what really helped me understand why I was doing this is because I wanted to get a lot of the expat perspective out, especially to North American audiences who perhaps share the same journey as I have, or are going through similar problems or similar issues that I do or things that I think about. um, so all of that has been explored to a certain degree with my friends, or I've done it myself in my solo episodes and whatnot. But what has been missing from all of that has been an actual expert. I know the podcast is the drawing room expert, but if you haven't noticed so far, we're not actually experts here. But this particular episode, as I was saying, is different because we actually have an an expert in what we're going to be talking about. We really have those. So without any further ado, welcome to the podcast, Serena. How's it going?
Good, good. Thank you so much for having me, Zaib. And I completely hear you. The planning phase can be so much more exciting than actually getting yourself down to doing it.
Yeah.
I think the approach that you're using is great because connecting ourselves to our why,
Mm,
why are we doing this in the first place, is one of the, best motivation strategies that we can use.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah.
So generally, what I wanted to discuss here on this episode, I mean, we can dive into your personal journey as well a little bit before we talk about the experiences that we wanted to discuss in this. And you and I were discussing this before we decided to record as to what topics. I think what would really be interesting and I wanted to explore with you was the experiences of an expat,
Mm,
and also something that which is kind of related to this and sort of not as well. Is this is a career shift for you? This is again another kind of a stigma in our part of the world that you, if uh, गलती से अगर if you've done doctorate or you've done accounting or engineering, तो आप जिंदगी भर that's it, like that you're going to stick with
it's a
that
life
forever,
sentence.
whether you like it or not. Because sometimes, and it's very common, not sometimes, I think seldom, I think people realize midway into working actual jobs and they're like, this is not what I thought, this is not what I thought it's going to be. Even when they're studying for it, that they mid um, um, student life, they realize that this is not what I want to do, but they are so, it's considered almost non-serious of you if you change paths. So I mean,
Mm.
how did you first let's explore what your previous career was and how is that different from this one, and then how did you come around that? Because I'm sure there must have been some questions not just around you but I think within you as well.
Oh yeah. That's a big question, a loaded question, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible because I know that we have lots of exciting stuff to talk about when it comes to expats and the challenges that we face, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to my career shift, so I, majored in economics. I went and started working in market research in Procter and Gamble. Spent 4 years there. Then I started working in marketing. Um, to tell you the truth, like from the get-go, I felt like these corporate jobs, even though, having graduated from the university that I graduated from, these were the most sought after jobs.
I'm sure.
So I should have been grateful, which is what I kept telling myself and what I, kept hearing around me. But it just really never clicked with me. And it clicks for a lot of people, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking away from, it being the right kind of job for a lot of people. But for me personally, it really just didn't, you know, do the trick. So very early on, I was disillusioned. But, having said that, I've always been an overachiever, a perfectionist, like had to give my
And
all to
humble.
each and everything. And humble, yes.
Sorry, this is
Um,
how I do it. I do kind of like a little bit of
no
banter in
worries.
between,
Please
peppering a
do,
little bit of.
please do.
Okay,
Yeah.
continue. Sorry.
Um, but yeah, so it was very difficult for me to wrap my head around it, right? Like I, was coming from this background of I need to be the best at everything I do. I don't know why, but it just needs to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I'm trying to give my all to these jobs and it's going well, but I am just not happy with the way that I feel. I'm super disillusioned with life. I'm feeling stuck. I'm feeling hopeless. I'm feeling helpless. So I'm burning myself out. I'm not addressing whatever it is that I'm feeling. I don't really have any long-term or mid-term plans. And I think when I was in Dubai, so when I was in the UAE and working in marketing, which is like just a super, super strenuous job. And I think the Middle Eastern work environment is just cutthroat. So I was working
Mm-hmm.
over 12-hour days. My sister's a doctor. Like even she was just like, "What are you doing?" Even I don't work this long.
I know.
So yeah, I think when I look back at that, corporate gig that I had, the very last one, I'm grateful for it because it literally just, pushed me over the edge, completely burnt out to the point where even getting out of bed became a task and a half, you know.
Yep.
I had to like start calling in sick to work, and this was very unlike me. And it was
Mm-hmm.
very, like I felt like a lot of shame, a lot of just felt so stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and couldn't really put my finger on it. Thankfully, that's when I came across coaching, right? And I started going and seeing a coach for myself. So I started my journey into this industry as a client, like sitting across the table
Right.
from my coach. And at one of the probably lowest points in my life, where not just work wise, but personally, even relationships, friends, family, everything
Mm-hmm.
was just rock bottom. Um, and yeah, so that's where I started my journey. It wasn't like, oh my God, I took one session and my entire life has changed, but it was more to the effect of, which is a common
Yeah.
misconception. We always try chasing those magic pills and those quick fixes.
Hmm.
But once I started doing that, I started going for those sessions, I started to see things so differently, Zaib. Like
Hmm.
I think I, for the first time in my life, discovered the agency that I have, the choices that I have made, and the choices that I can make. Like I felt so stuck, but like I just needed to kind of like reacquaint myself with the fact that
Right.
these are all choices and I can still change my situation. And so one thing led to another. Long story short,
Mhm.
I took some time off work and for my own self development. After taking, quite a few coaching sessions, I got a certification in coaching in NLP, which is like
Mhm.
neuro-linguistic programming, did that certification for myself. I never thought in 1,000 years that I would become a coach, but I thought
Mhm.
this is what I need right now. And then I started taking more and more certifications because I just couldn't stop. And finally, I just resigned from my job and started doing this full time. And even to date, like I'm taking, constantly learning and growing in terms of building my practice because I feel
Mhm.
like there is just so much information, so many tools out there
Mhm.
that we're not exposed to. So, in order to support my clients in the best way possible, both consciously and subconsciously, I'm just in that constant pursuit of, okay, like, what else can I add to my, skill
Right.
set so I can best support my clients? And honestly, haven't looked back since.
Yeah, I mean, so what I found really interesting about your background, I mean, you mentioned that you worked in marketing, and this particular shift, although does seem on paper quite drastic to your previous life professionally, but I do get a sense that there are some parallels that are perhaps, I mean, from as an outsider I can draw. I mean, in marketing, you're pretty much selling something which is perhaps bigger than you or better than you, or you're almost kind of like, hey, you want this or you need this, almost like selling an idea, which is what I would feel a coach perhaps would do. I haven't sat through a session myself. I don't know, maybe if this one counts as, I don't know, but um, but I haven't sat through that, so I don't know exactly how it works. But what I do think it may be close to that is that you're trying to elevate people. You're trying to give them a perspective on their potential, which is I would think, where your marketing skills would come in handy. Is that true?
You're so right. Like I feel like marketing, but also a lot of the work that I did in market research was super relevant. Like even
Mm,
right now, there was a
preparation.
lot of training. Yeah, there was a lot of training, facilitation. That was always something that was probably the favorite part of my job, running those
Yeah.
trainings, developing them, building that capability in-house within the organization, and so on and so forth. So that was the part that really used to excite me. And
Hmm.
being that, like, because in market research, I was like the in-house consultant, so to speak, for the sales
Hmm.
and the marketing teams and the management teams. So, there was this constant like data-backed kind of,
Yeah.
approach. And even
Yeah.
right now, it's very similar to the approach that I use in my coaching, that I'm not just like one end of the spectrum. So if there are two ends of the spectrum, like one's super scientific and the other one is super spiritual and woo-woo,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I feel like I kind of lie in the middle and bridge both.
Right.
So the data, the science, all of that is important to me, right? Like to understand that, okay, is this just fluff or does this actually work?
Yeah.
But then also the spiritual aspects of it are something that, you can't really do any of this work without
Yeah, you
after
can't
a
deny
certain
those. Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed, agreed. Um, I think what really interests me about career changes as well, and I talked to I think my friend in one of our previous episodes, I was discussing this, and one of our experiences were that we had skill sets that we were growing up with, which we thought were hobbies, but and I just asked my friend and I said, did you ever think that, that this is a hobby because that you'll never be allowed to convert this into a career? Or you genuinely thought that, hey, I don't want to do this. I just like unwinding myself and playing guitar, for example, as I do, or, doing other things like sports or whatever. Um, so I mean, the interesting that I think that I've discovered over here, at least in North American lifestyle, is that people do this all the time. I had a partner when I was working in consulting who in his previous life was a jazz musician, and he did that for like 10 years. He was on the road, like he was a proper musician. He would go around the country playing music, jazz music at that. And then all of a sudden he thought, okay, you know what, this is not working out. I'm just going to go to school, go back to school, do my CPAs, become an accountant, sign for a firm, which he did, and then ended up to 10, 15 years later becoming a partner, which is unbelievable. In For me at least, I was like, how is this even possible? How can people explore different lives? It's like living two different lives. So do
Yeah.
you think that's changing careers, especially at that, is it based out of, I don't know, uh, privilege, but I say privilege very respectfully, or is it something that you feel like, everyone has the choice and the option, but people just limit themselves? I mean, this goes back to what you do with your coaching as well. You kind of like unlock those potential where you say you don't limit yourself. So do you think that's a
Yeah.
matter of limiting oneself, or is it actually economic realities also play a role?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly, Zaib.
Hmm.
For sure, like it does depend, not everybody can just resign from their job
Hmm.
and have like a perfect life and switch careers and, go and go after their photography, careers or
Yeah, yeah.
XYZ. Like it takes a while to obviously build it up.
Hmm.
So for sure, you need the resources. You need to think it through. It can't just be one of those impulsive decisions. But at the same time, I feel like also from the culture that we come from, we haven't normalized these career switches. We
Hmm.
haven't normalized, like you said, these hobbies that we have potentially when we were growing up, be it photography, be it playing the guitar, be it anything, right? We don't really take them seriously. And it's not encouraged, or we're not motivated to take it seriously unless it's
Yeah.
anything to do with becoming a doctor or an engineer or an accountant
Yeah.
or like so on and so forth. Like, is it
Yeah.
monetizable? In today's day and age, you can monetize pretty much everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the latest generation, they're living in in an age where they're monetizing their lives on TikTok. So
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here saying we should do that or we shouldn't do that. There's no right or wrong, but I
Hmm.
just feel like there is that choice that a lot of the times we don't take, or we think log kya kahenge, or we
Uh-huh.
think that, oh, this means we're a failure, or this means it didn't work out, or what will people think? But actually, that's really not the case, because we have that agency and we have that choice to choose our own path. So if that path isn't quitting your job and like starting off like your own business from scratch, like the very
Mhm.
next day, maybe it's doing both in parallel. And I know a lot
Right.
of people who've done that, and then finally reaching a point where you feel like, okay, this is now on its feet and now I can quit my job. Great.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, yeah.
But there's always that choice, and there's always those free number of hours or minutes, and those priorities, like in a day, those priorities that we can make to make it a reality. But I feel like it's looked down upon and it's considered, oh, you're confused, or just
Yeah.
give your all. Like, we don't really have that concept of, living more holistic lives in
Mm.
terms of like these are our hobbies, but we can take them seriously. This is just not like for fun, and it's something that like when we grow up, we won't have time for them, and that's okay. We can continue to take them seriously because we keep going through so many different seasons of life, right?
Yeah.
Like at some point um you can like monetize. Like I've living in Toronto over here, like there's this new app. I don't know if it's in the rest of North America. It's called Cookin. And
Okay.
basically, there are these home chefs, and home chefs like you and me, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They provide the delivery, they provide the logistics, they provide the packaging. All you need to do is just make a page, put up your offers, your dishes. You can make, like, I don't know, cinnamon rolls or whatever you want. You can
Mm-hmm.
monetize that. That doesn't mean you're no longer a corporate executive. That doesn't mean you're no longer, whatever it is that you do. But that means that you're monetizing something that you actually find therapeutic for yourself. You find cooking
Right.
maybe therapeutic for yourself. So,
Mm.
and that needs to be normalized.
I think that's an interesting point because that also raises another question, that when you say, "Oh, you don't have to quit your corporate job or you don't have to do this, you can do this on the side." What the undertones of that is that corporate job is better than this, right? And why?
Mm,
If you really boil it down, people, if you really boil it down, the reason behind that would be economical. That, oh, you earn more, quote unquote, earn more, so then it becomes materialistic. That your materialistic
mm.
ends mean more than your spiritual ends or your mental health ends, right? So for example, as you said, that you feel more therapeutic, cooking, or you feel therapeutic gardening or doing other things that you feel like it's just calming for you and you feel good when you do those things. You almost, society has kind of like created this environment where those kind of activities are almost like passed on as a hobby, and hobby means you almost kind of like look down upon, honestly, because hobbies mean that you do something when you're free and you don't want to do when you're not doing important stuff, you know what I mean? So all of a
Yeah,
sudden, I mean, you explore this idea of why is this idea that where a corporate job or a quote unquote proper job means more to you in your life, or should mean more to you in your life than your own happiness, because I think that's where a lot of challenges take place. And specifically talking about expats, I think, transitioning into that conversation, people
mm.
are back in Pakistan, at least, are used to living a very rigid, you know diet of a life where they say, okay, this is how it goes, go to school, go to college, go to university, these are the subjects that you can pick, and then from then you go to, like Procter and Gamble, or uh, you know uh, any of those big
Unilever.
Unilever.
Yeah.
That name was escaping me for some reason, but you do that, and then perhaps maybe get a transfer and work abroad or something. So that's like almost like a staple diet of a life that you like almost imagine for yourself back Pakistan. But when you come over here, you realize there's other
So much
ways,
more.
so much more that you can
Yeah.
do. um
Yeah.
so and that I feel like creates that self-doubt, and then you know people sometimes lose sight of what they actually are, because you take a thirsty person to the pond, they're going to try and drink the whole pond, which is obviously unrealistic. So that's what I feel like sometimes what happens, that you go from a completely rigid, controlled, stapled life to
Yeah.
this massive land of opportunities, and you feel like you end up losing yourself even more, because then you're like all over the place almost. That's where
Mm.
I feel like there has to be a little bit of more, you need to take it step by step. So what do you think about, I mean, do you feel like that is a classic challenge for expats when they come over here, or come go anywhere, and they feel like there's this massive other world that they never knew about?
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. You're so right, because it's like going from that cookie cutter kind of life to suddenly there's so many opportunities. Everybody's had a head start over you
Hmm.
because, like, so that self-doubt and
Hmm.
just questioning yourself, and also that overwhelm is very
Yeah.
real. And I think the overwhelm, like the number one thing that overwhelm results in is inaction and like complete paralysis, right? Because you
Yeah.
get so overwhelmed, you keep hearing about what your coworkers, your colleagues, friends of friends, people you've heard about, what they're doing around you, and you just think, oh my God, like, what am I doing here? And I thought I was the best of the best doing, XYZ in my career, and now I'm here, and everybody's priorities are a little more well-rounded, or they're looking at their lives a little more holistically, and they've had such a huge head start, and then you can't help but feel disgruntled and almost like a little bit of a victim and feel sorry for yourself. And it's like a very common thing that I found, I think personally in my experiences as an expat also,
Hmm.
amongst my friends and family also, and even like across clients, that okay, like that comparison, you know, comes in where you
Hmm.
think, oh, like this friend of mine or this colleague of mine has been taking guitar lessons, or I don't know, has been skiing since
Yeah,
he was 4 years old. So, like, what's the point of me even trying at 30? Like, what's the point,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Or at 40?
A small anecdote, I think, related to this is what I experienced when I first moved here was, there's this culture over here that every time on a Monday they ask you, oh, so what did you do this weekend? First
Yeah.
couple of times, I was like, okay, I was new, so yeah, I did this and that, and then after a few weeks, I was like, just slept. I don't. And then they have these stories to tell, and I almost felt like guilty that I don't have any story to tell because I
Yeah.
didn't do anything. Because what am I supposed to do? I've never done these kind of things like outdoorsy activities. The max you would do back in Pakistan was like go out with friends, and that was also like not like every weekend. It would be once in a few weeks or a month's activity, and that too to go eat. Or if there's a good movie out, you go watch a movie,
Yeah.
or you would just spend hours sitting on the streets just talking, right. So that's not an
Yeah.
activity, it's just chatting, right? So I've almost felt like so guilty, and at one point I had to like, I mean, I gotta say, I started making things up. Honestly, I was like,
I
I
knew
was like,
that was coming.
I mean, yeah, I went like, I don't know, I went hiking or whatever, and just it was just so I started feeling left out of the conversation because I didn't have nothing to share, and I feel like that happens with a lot of people when they come over here, that they realize, it's 9 to 5, which they consider what their real life is back home. There's actually more to that
Hmm.
because they really make sure that they do other things, spend time with their kids, go out, play soccer on Saturdays with their kids or whatever, or just like go hiking or go, even if they have one day in the weekend, they would go camping somewhere, which is, something that I would never imagine me doing or anybody around me doing back in Karachi.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That is so true. I feel like over here, there's this, like, and this is part of the culture shock that I think,
Mm,
us like South Asians or Pakistanis, like we experience where we feel kind of left out. And I think it just kind of underlines that entire like lack of belonging. If you're a
mm,
first generation expat, you're already trying to fit in. You're trying to do your best at your job, let's say, because that's basically what making it is. Like that's the
yeah,
definition of, having made it. And then suddenly you realize that people actually have a lot of other things on their plate. It's not like they're just eating, like their career slice of career, but there's like so many other slices of the pie.
yeah,
And you do feel like you're lagging behind. You do feel overwhelmed. And exactly, like, what did you do over the weekend? And so many of my clients have had similar stories.
hmm,
So many expat, because most of my clients are, expats, like a fair chunk of them,
yep,
men and women, a lot of them from Pakistan, across like Australia, North America, the UK, like everywhere, right?
hmm,
And it's like also as we speak more about the rest of the challenges that expats may face, but it's uncanny how similar all, regardless of the continent, regardless of so many different like geographical limitations, the issues that we face are so similar, which means like there's this entire community which is completely like untapped, probably not necessarily talking to each other, not
hmm,
connected, not maybe primed for getting that support or seeking that support,
right,
um, and feeling just so out of place, right? And
right.
not necessarily, maybe the resources are available, but because of your own preconceived notions or the culture you're coming from or the stigma or the taboo around seeking support from an expert, whoever the expert may be, whether it's a hypnotherapist, a coach, a therapist, whoever it
Even a
is.
doctor, in my instance, I mean, even going to a doctor, I'm like, why am I going to I'm not sick, I don't need to go, like those kind of things that you need to
Mm,
almost feel, you need to get used to over here, because over here there's a
yeah.
concept of having physicals every year. God knows I've never
Mm,
done that like back home. we don't do those things. The only time when we visit the
Yeah.
doctor is when you have, a little bit of sickness here and there. So those those are new things. I mean, what I really want you to, really dive into, using your experiences, is the identity crisis that people then go into,
Hmm.
after facing, the realities of, a culture shock or an expectation gap of, like, okay,
Yeah.
am I supposed to fit in? Am I a Pakistani, Indian, or Bangladeshi? Am I a South Asian, or am I an American right now? Because
Hmm.
what really challenges you when that is happening is that same time, in parallel, you're in touch with your friends, your family back home, right? And then you're making constant visits as well. If you're like me, I go there every year almost. um so you're almost kind of like, you you don't let go of that previous life, you know what I mean? And then that increases the confusion when you come back and you feel like, okay, I'm kind of like living these two lives over here, that when I go back
Hmm.
home I am this other person, and when I come over here I'm this completely different, almost like a machine. How does one recognize that, or acknowledge that first, and then try and, come to terms with it? Because these are real the, these are real feelings that people, I'm sure, go through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true, 100%. And I feel like what makes these feelings even more difficult to go through, Zabe, is the fact that they're so complicated,
Yeah.
right? There's so much shame, and there's so much shame around them. And for anybody who's listening to this, and just to share, like, shame is the number one emotion blocking emotion. Okay. And what that means
Mhm.
is that, for example, if I'm feeling sad, but I'm feeling ashamed for feeling sad, I'm not allowing myself to physically, mentally, emotionally process the sadness because
Mm.
shame is blocking
Interesting.
it. It's like, you
Yeah.
shouldn't be feeling sad. You're abroad, you're an
Yeah.
expat, you're living it up, you have the best
Yeah.
job. You shouldn't be
Hmm.
feeling sad. And so the sadness gets stuck in different parts of my body,
Wow.
and it stays there until, over years, over decades, if we keep like certain complicated and difficult emotions like sadness or guilt or grief, it comes up in chronic illnesses and so on. So that's a
Wow.
conversation for another day. It's
Yeah.
all like, super
All
exciting stuff
connected.
that it's all connected. It's all connected. It's insane how connected it is. But that shame, like going back to my former point,
Hmm.
is that number one, emotion blocker. And I feel like for expats, that's so common because we don't, number one, we've come from a place where 90% of the times, okay, we haven't been taught the tools to regulate our emotions, to process and release our emotions, to name our emotions, to acknowledge them, to validate them. We're coming from a place where invalidation or toxic positivity or, oh, just drink more water or pray a little bit more or do this more. And all of this advice is coming from a good place. But
Yeah.
at the same time, our culture or the generation we've come from, the generations we've come from, it hasn't really built a conducive environment for us to actually validate and acknowledge our own experiences, especially our
Mhm.
emotional experiences, which are so intangible, right?
Right.
So we're coming from this background into this completely new setting where, if we're lucky, we may have friends or family.
Yeah.
A lot of the times we don't, as
Yep.
expats, a lot
Yep.
of the times. And so you're basically going from scratch. You may be looking for a job, or you may, if you're lucky, you may already have one. So you have all of this instability, or like, starting from scratch in terms of your relationships, your personal life, your professional life, a lot of external triggers. And then what tops it all off, like the cherry on top, like I said, was we don't have those tools, the know-how to self-regulate, to really understand what we're going through. And
Mm.
then we're also feeling ashamed because a lot of people, and I've heard this from a lot of my clients, like their family or friends or the people they're closest to back home don't even want to, and these are the people they feel close enough to speak to about their experiences, right? A
Right.
lot of the times, those are then also the people who say, stop complaining. Like
Mm.
seriously, you're
Stop
you're sitting
whining.
in America. Stop whining. Like you
Yeah.
you have it all. We're sitting and rotting in this hellhole or whatever you want
Uh,
to call it. Like that's
yeah.
usually the narrative that you get.
Hmm.
and you're earning in dollars, you're this, you're that, and then your own experience of feeling lonely, feeling homesick, feeling the culture shock, just feeling all of these such weird and icky, complicated emotions, you don't know where to go. You just
I can
really don't know where to go.
I can almost imagine
Yeah.
anyone who's probably listening to this and thinking that, oh, here's these guys again, they're expats, and again, as you rightfully said, having perfect lives, have no issues with electricity or gas, and here they are, they're privileged whining again. Oh, we're so sad, and somebody please understand us, we're needy and all of that. What do you say to that? Like, because I'm sure that that's
Mm,
a real comment, that's a real
yeah,
way people
for sure.
understand these things. The way they translate this into your head, they're saying that, oh, come on, get off your high horses of like, oh, I'm so sad, and it's almost like how people react to the royal family, and Harry and Prince Harry and all those guys complaining about media and all that. Come on, you have
Yeah.
everything in the world, and now you're complaining just about like this media intrusion and stuff. What do you say about those things? How would you respond to that?
I think, like, honestly, I would respond to it by saying,
Delete the comment.
no, no. I would respond to it by saying, and just sharing with whoever it is that's listening over here, that this is not a competition of who has it worse. It's
That's
not.
great. Yep. Yeah.
And the reason why we have so many generations of generational baggage and traumas carrying forward and forward and forward is because we feel like we should be grateful. We feel like our experience isn't as bad as, I don't know, at least we're not starving to death. Yes, we
Yeah.
feel like crap, but like,
Yeah. At
excuse
least we're
my
not.
French,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, so many
Yeah.
people have it worse. And this is like the number one way of invalidating your experience. Now, that doesn't mean to say like you and me are sitting here, Zabe, and having this conversation so we can whine together and vent and just talk about, oh, it's not really that great.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's so that the first step to changing your situation, be it mentally, emotionally, physically, externally, is to have an unconditional acceptance of what is.
Mm,
That's it.
right. Right.
So, unless you have an unconditional acceptance of those icky emotions that you're feeling or the experience that you're going through, you're not going to be able to move forward towards a solution, towards changing your mindset, towards working on it, towards maybe seeking support, right?
Right.
So the unconditional acceptance of what is applies to the royal family, it applies to a millionaire, it applies to everybody. It applies to the people in Pakistan, everywhere, right? The
But
only
are
way we
we?
can move forward is
Yeah.
with that. Yeah.
Are we saying? Are we saying like we're not saying that there are no layers or levels of feeling or having it bad, right? We're still accepting the fact that the guy on the street, homeless guy, is perhaps worse than me, who's like has something on, like, a shelter with me. I can eat,
Yeah,
I can do. We're still accepting that those layers and levels exist, but what we're
of
saying is
course.
that at each level there's a different type of reality that every human being gets to deal with. Because if going from homelessness to a home means you have it all and you should be grateful and that's it, that would mean that every person with a home should be happy, which is obviously, we know that's not the case, right?
Basic.
And then everyone who's a millionaire should be happy. Then we know that's not the case. Everyone who's a billionaire should be happy. We know that's not the case. So happiness is not tied. Again, going back to my earlier comment, we almost tie all our happiness and validation and respect from society to material gains, be it corporate jobs, be it green cards, be it being famous and being whatever. And uh,
Yeah.
that we feel like that's the validation that we need, but it's not. Sadness and happiness don't depend on these things, and we keep saying those things loudly. So being thankful is one thing, but uh, you know recognizing, as you said, owning and acknowledging those feelings is another thing. It's not like we're saying that don't be thankful, right?
Yeah. For sure, for sure. Gratitude is like one of the number one ways to uplift your day-to-day well-being levels. And this
Mm.
is what I coach my clients on a lot. So by no means am I saying that, don't be thankful. Just always
Right.
want more. But
Yeah.
I mean to say that gratitude has its own place, but we just need to be mindful of when it turns into toxic positivity, which is basically distracting ourselves from our current situation or our current challenges. It's
Hmm.
a way to distract yourself, and we don't want to do that because then
Right.
the emotions are still stuck in our body. Then we look back at our lives and we say, yeah, I spent 2 years in the States. And then you realize, yeah, I never really processed all of that culture shock, that loneliness, that homesickness. I just couldn't do it. I just went back home after 2 years. So you never processed any of that sadness in order to create any movement in your life.
Hmm.
You let that emotion stay stuck.
Right.
You don't want to do that.
Right. And then just, you know, also going back to, your experiences with with expats, specifically, who come from similar backgrounds as you and I, do you feel like they do you feel like you understand why that stigma exists in the first place, where they, and these are educated people, by the way, these are not people on the streets who end up like one fine morning immigrating to the West. These are educated people who've probably gone to the best schools in the country, who've probably had access to information and cultures from all around the world. I mean, nowadays, who doesn't? But you know, these are people who you would expect them to be aware of these things. But when you start and unwinding them, do you figure out why that's the case? Why even the most privileged or most educated people still attach in a stigma, some sort of stigma to personal development, therapy, mental health, well-being? You know, what did you think? What does your experience say? Why is that the case?
I mean, I don't think I need to try very hard to understand because, having lived most of my life in Pakistan, having been exposed to the culture
Yeah.
and what is said in, society amongst just so many layers of society, I think it wasn't very difficult for me to understand where they were coming from, where that, resistance or hesitance is coming
Hmm.
from. It's around us. Like, at least in my personal experience, it's been, you know, amongst friends or family. I think on a societal level, we have this mindset, and I think you alluded to it also earlier in the conversation of don't fix what isn't broken. And I think
Hmm.
mental health is one of those intangible things, right? So let's say somebody's put on a lot of weight. You can tangibly see it. People comment on it all the time. Oh my God, you've put on so much weight. But mentally, whatever is going on, emotionally, whatever is going on, it's so intangible that there hasn't been enough conversation around acknowledging it and giving it its a rightful place in
Hmm.
terms of, something that you'd actually spend money on, right? Or
Right.
something you'd actually take some time out on a daily basis or a weekly
Hmm.
basis. So to answer your question also, like, you know, the stigma is coming from, like I briefly mentioned, the kinds of responses that a lot of individuals, like a lot of my clients, for example, have come
Hmm.
for coaching to me, okay, and they'd say, yeah, my partner doesn't know I'm getting this, so I need
Hmm.
to take my calls at work,
Oh,
or I need
wow.
to take my calls from the car,
Yeah.
or my family doesn't know if they're living with their parents. My family doesn't know that I'm taking these calls. Yes, of course, there's also certain clients who have supportive, and understanding
Right.
partners or families, but there is a fair chunk who, just like you said, are from the best schools or universities, and are have gotten that privilege, but still, from a mindset aspect, they have taken a decision that they need support. They've shown the courage to actually sign up for those
Hmm.
sessions. But they know that, like, listen, I just don't want to go through what my mom is going to say or what my dad is going to say or what my husband or my wife is going to say. They don't
Hmm.
know I'm taking these sessions. So it
So yeah,
happens.
did you unlock, like, is it just purely cultural and what people have attached to it, or is it also just like a mental block of their own, like they perhaps aren't aware of that's people, I guess, why people stop themselves or ignore this idea of personal development or mental health or therapy.
Well, I mean, as for my clients, they've taken the leap of faith. They've
Right.
taken the plunge and
Right.
signed up, paid
Right.
money, and
Mhm.
prioritized it. They're showing up. But what they don't want to do is to open up this can of worms, which, knowing their friends or family members, they know that it may not go down really well with them, or it may be
Yeah, they might
triggering
be
or
treated as like
difficult.
damaged goods. Like they might be treated as damaged goods. Like, oh, this guy is loose up top or something. If they
Yeah,
if they're
like that's
taking
that's one
therapy.
extreme.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then another extreme is, it could be so many different responses that would just make you feel uncomfortable, or you make you not want to have that conversation. And I feel
Mhm.
like, to all the listeners over here, and even, you know, in my circles, what the one difference that we can start to make is to start talking about these things. Like, talking about, of course, you don't need to go into like a history of like all your experience, whatever you don't want to share, you don't need to share everything, but
Mhm.
making it normal in your friend circles, in your family circles, of how you're seeking support. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's great, it's helping me. Or how you're going for your weekly therapy or your weekly coaching sessions, and
Mhm.
it's something, just the way you go to the gym, and
Right.
there's no questions asked. Or just the way you're going for, let's say, yoga.
Mhm.
This is your mental emotional upkeep, or this
Yeah.
is you taking yourself and your life seriously. If anything, you should be applauded for it.
Yeah.
you know so just making that a conversation, or just saying it, mentioning it, I feel like, really, like, I've had a lot of clients who felt really good when they'd hear like friends mention, oh yeah, I've been seeking support from XYZ. By the way, like, 50% of my clients come through referrals.
Wow.
Yeah. And now these referrals are okay, like, she told me about you and she said that you were, so, it comes from word of mouth, but I know that we don't, like, I'm not saying talk about me, obviously, specifically, but talk about it in general. What is helping you?
Mhm.
What is helping you? Is it your coach? Is it your hypnotherapist? Is it your therapist?
Mhm.
Exchange numbers, share the resources.
Exactly. I
These
think yeah.
conversations need to happen.
S where do you see, like, do you see that needle has moved a little bit, at least as far as these experiences are concerned, specifically in expats? I mean, do you feel like, even if it's in the West, but do you feel like this is starting to get a little bit normal? If this was, if you were to rate it out of 10, where are we on the scale? Are we at a 3, moving towards a 4? Are we 5? How far do you think this community has come or is going when it comes to mental health and self empowerment?
Um,
Or
that's
there's
that's a
work to be
tough
done?
one. I think there's always work to be done, for sure, and I think that's also, part of the big reason of why we're having this conversation, and why I'm getting passionate about it like this. But at the same time, having worked with all these expat clients, it's really refreshing to see that people are taking this seriously.
Okay.
You know, and I think one of the things that, other than the stigma attached to it, other than the extra courage you need to show to actually sign up, or reach out for that support, you may or may not be getting the support of your friends and family members, right?
Mhm.
Other than that barrier, there's also the barrier of how Western therapy doesn't necessarily, you have these preconceived notions, not, and usually they're a little bit negative, what you've seen in the movies, what you've seen
Yeah.
on shows of westernized therapy, and you think, what am I going to talk about? Like, do they even understand me? Do they even understand my life?
Right.
So there's that. And then on top of that, like, I've had a lot of clients who've mentioned to me, by the way, that, yeah, I took therapy, I took one or two sessions, just wasn't
Didn't
for
work out.
me. And then it didn't work out. And then I went off of it like for
Wow.
years. They get so disillusioned that, oh, I mustered up so much courage. I blocked time on my calendar to do this. And then I'm speaking to someone, and because of obviously my own like subconscious preconceived notions and all of that, and also the fact that maybe a lot of Western therapists cannot understand the South Asian experience of life, for
Sure. Yeah.
example, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They get so disillusioned that then they just back down and they say
Mm,
that, okay, this isn't for me. This is just like woo-woo stuff. This is really not
mm.
for me. I don't want to talk about my feelings to, you know,
To quote unquote
what,
strangers.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
my message to anybody who's gone through anything similar to that would be
Hmm.
to find someone you can relate to, right? Like it's a process. It's a process, and it's okay for it to be a process. Um,
I think those are
yeah.
those are a couple of things I wanted to also ask you about is because again I'm being very selfish here because these are things that I think about as
Mm,
well. So I don't know if a lot of people think about these things as well, but the process to find the right person. I think I don't know who I
mm,
heard or where I read. I don't remember, but um, they said that your first therapist is not usually the one that you end up sticking up with because it's almost kind of like a discovery phase when you feel like, oh yeah, you almost like go through the first one is like almost like a stepping stone. And that kind of like interests me because I'm almost like thinking that if I were to go that route, it means definitely I need to go through a few before I end up deciding which. So that also again sounds like work. You know what I mean? So I'm sure a
mm.
lot of people might think about it from that angle. They're like, oh, bhai yaar, itna sara kaam hai. Like, I have to go through these people, almost like interview them, and and then feel who I connect with. Maybe if I don't connect, maybe that's gonna take five, people I talk to, maybe two, maybe 10, who knows, right? So what do you say to them? Because that's what sometimes holds people back into exploring these things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a very valid question. And just
And then
what
also,
I would,
I'm sorry, just one more thing.
yeah.
And then also, someone like me specifically would find it really difficult to disconnect because I would feel almost like obliged to stick with the first one. I'm like, okay, you know what, I'm too shy
Mm,
to even like let them know that I'm sorry. You can. I would stick with the same barber even if they're butchering my hair, hairs, out of just sheer niceness that I don't want the guy to feel bad. So I'm that kind of
yeah.
person. So I'm sure
Mm,
people think like that as well. They're like, oh God, I need to stick with them because they're such a nice person. They're nice, but it's not working out for me. But they're personally they're nice. You know what I mean? So they don't want to
yeah.
hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
So what do you say about that?
So I think the headline that I want to put across is it is super important to click with your with the expert you're working with, be
Yeah,
it your coach, your therapist, whatever it is.
yeah,
Very important to click with them. However, at the same time, I know that this is something that we hear very often, but at the same time, it's not as if you're going to click with them in the first 5 minutes of the call,
yeah.
right? So you need to go in with an open mind. It's
Mhm.
not as if you can write off like, you know, an entire gender or an entire race or in like, just
Mhm.
be open, right? Because everybody is different. Everybody has
Mhm.
their own working style. Everybody
Mhm.
is different. And by
Mhm.
the way, somebody who maybe doesn't suit you in this season of your life might suit you in the
That's
next
true.
season of your life.
Yeah.
And you're not going to, this is not a life sentence, Zaib. This is also not like a marriage. You're not
Yeah.
going to stick to your therapist. You can potentially. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but
Mhm.
also a lot of the people that I've come across, and even personally, you don't stick to the same person for life.
Yeah.
You actually, learn a lot in different phases, in different seasons of your life. Like, let's say you're an expat, you've just moved. You want to work on how you can better self-regulate, manage your emotions, and also, things at work are going a little haywire. Find the
Mm.
person who can best help you.
Mm.
Treat your goals, your personal and professional goals, the same way you would treat, you go for your corporate sector or whatever, job, and you have like a fiscal year and, review or like an
Mhm.
action plan. treat your
Mhm.
personal and professional goals the same way. Write them down and be like, okay, now how do I get the resources? Who's going to be the best person to support me? And who do I click with? And
Yeah.
trust your gut. Trust your gut. You don't need to over intellectualize, over analyze anything,
Yeah.
right? Trust your gut and your instincts in the process because it's not always a left brain decision, you know?
Mhm.
For example, I give this example to a lot of my clients. Like if you have to hold up your end of the bargain, and your coach or hypnotherapist, whoever it is, it has to hold up their end of the bargain. But it's a 50-50 partnership.
Mhm.
So if you fall short or if I fall short, like we won't be able to make that 100% change possible for you. So we both need to hold each other accountable, be
Mhm.
transparent, be
Mhm.
open. And this is a relationship that you need to nurture over time.
Correct.
And you need to have that transparent, open, honest communication
Mhm.
on
Have you
both
said
both
no?
sides.
Have you said no to someone that you feel like they're not clicking? Because it's, as you said, it's a 50-50 thing. So do you
Yeah.
feel like that in maybe session 3 or something, where you feel like, oh, you know what, maybe this guy or this person is sticking with me because they're too nice to just say no. So maybe let me help them out and just say that, hey, I think maybe you should look at someone else because I don't think this one's gonna work. Have you done that?
Hmm. There have been a few times. I think a lot of the time there's like just a natural filtering process
Mm.
where, if we don't click, then both of us aren't clicking. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Yeah.
then perhaps like they're not going to follow up and sign up, and I'm going to be more than at peace with that. Because at
Hmm.
the end of the day, and this is what I say to each and every one of my, not my clients, but the people I chat with one-on-one in their compatibility call. So I have like this
Yeah.
30-minute compatibility call, right? And the purpose of that call is so we chat, we have those 30 to 45 minutes
Yeah.
where we get a good handle on, who you are, who I am, do you have any questions? We see where we are. And
Okay.
if there's a spark, if there's like that click,
Connection. Yeah.
exactly. We go forward, and if there are more questions, then we see, and then maybe they keep it at the back burner. Maybe they come back a few months later because they're like, okay, now I really need to take the plunge, and I
Right.
now I know you exist. And a
Right.
lot of times, like it's just instant, and then a lot of times, if there's no click, it's usually two-sided, right? It's all
Mhm.
energy.
Right.
So there have been very few times where I've basically referred them forward, not
Okay.
necessarily
That's a nice
because
way.
there's no, yeah, because it's not necessarily because, okay, I'm not going to hit it off with this. No, that's not the case for me, but it's more like, am I the best person to provide them
Mm.
what they need right now? And if I
Right.
can
Yeah.
find someone who's the best suited,
Mhm.
I'm more than happy to. And that's the intent of these compatibility calls is it's not about me signing up clients and upon clients. Like it's a partnership,
Yeah.
right?
It is a little
So
bit about signing those clients, right? Just a little bit.
not really. Not
Wow.
really. Actually, yeah. I feel it's easy to get lost in that need for, okay, must sign him on, must sign her on. But I think just like you said, like connect with your why. Why am I
Right.
doing this?
Right.
You know?
That's true. Yeah.
Um, I'm sure, we both don't want to be stuck with each other if we're not clicking for a month.
True.
So it's like, why sign up the client?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Makes sense. I mean, so now that they've gone through the discovery exercise, they've sat down with you, and you've understood where you're coming from. They want to sign up. One thing
Yeah.
that, again, a challenge that I feel like expats or people from our background have in their minds, which I want to pose to you right now, is um, they want to see benefits. They want to see tangible benefits come through. I wouldn't say like really quickly, but as soon as possible.
Mm,
um and I don't want to put you in a position where I say, okay, अब मुझे कब फायदा होगा, let me know, like कितना time लगेगा इसमें, right? It's not like you've given
mm,
your car to a mechanic and say कितना time में fix होगी. um
yeah.
but I also want to ask you about, like, because it is a service, it is it is an exercise with an end goal, right, in mind. It's not
Yeah.
like just you're just talking to someone. It's a goal oriented exercise, whatever you do.
Yeah.
when do you feel like that goal, I guess, what is that goal? Is it tangible? Is it not tangible? B, how soon on average do people starts to visualize and see that goal being achieved? Because I think that's what, again, another challenge of people moving in that direction, I feel, again, selfishly thinking, is they don't know how long do I need to stay? How long do I need to, how much time do I need to put in to get to what I need? You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
tangible tangibleness of a goal is what people, or benefits what people, wonder about. What do you have to say
Yeah.
about that?
Um, I think this is a great question because again, like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast was it's very intangible, right?
Mm.
Your emotional well-being, your mental health well-being, it's all very intangible. But the
And
good part
subjective.
is, and very subjective,
Hmm.
and but the good part is that it's so interconnected with your physical well-being or your
True.
performance at work or the quality of your relationships or the quality of your communication, like are you or like how confident you're feeling, like it's also a feeling but at the same time you can see it, right?
True.
Or like it's their manifestations all around you.
Hmm.
Of course it doesn't, it's not like a magic pill in terms of
Yeah.
okay, you've worked, you've had 3 sessions and now all of a sudden your relationships are perfect,
Yeah.
everybody's being great and you're being
Yeah.
great and you're communicating. But it's a process, it's a
Hmm.
journey. And the way that I work with my clients and based on my experience over the last, over 3 years, is that one-off sessions don't amount to really
Don't-
anything.
Anything. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Which is why I tend not to work with my clients for one-off sessions. And I think that helps me also sift through serious clients because, you need to be
Yeah.
taking it seriously.
Correct.
Um, so I work with my clients anywhere between 1 to 3 months. And 1 month would basically be 4 weekly sessions.
Hmm.
And that's the minimum, right?
Okay.
And then a lot of those clients then sign up for another month or another
Mm.
month. And then the goals also, of course, there's always like these goals, and the goals are sometimes tangible and sometimes they're not tangible. Let's say, for example, somebody wants to work on just how they're feeling. They're feeling super overwhelmed. They've just, I had a client who had just recently graduated from one of the top tier universities in the US, entering the
Mm.
workforce, but everything was just crumbling around him, right? He didn't
Mm.
understand, like, okay, I've done everything I wanted to do in my life. Now what?
Right.
I wanted to do my master's, done it. I wanted to go and work in this company, done it. I've done everything. And now I need to like transition into the workforce, but there's this sudden disillusionment, there's this sudden, what next, what now, and really low levels of like well-being,
Hmm.
right? And for him, the goals weren't very tangible, but like 3 months later when he reaches out to me, he's just like, I couldn't get out of bed, and I couldn't do my laundry, and now I'm in a place where I feel like I have control and I'm okay with the uncontrollables,
And he's doing
you
laundry,
know
which is good to know.
and he's doing laundry. So in that case it's intangible, but those effects, and most of my clients, like they'll reach out to me a few months later because that's when they'll start like, reflecting. And then some of
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
on the go also, like kind of, for example, I'll give you another example, and the reason I'm giving these examples is just to give you a really brief and quick glimpse and a flavor of,
Hmm.
it's very different from case
True.
to case
Hmm.
and challenge to challenge. So, for example, somebody wanted to work on their relationship with a parent who had been extremely toxic, very bitter, a lot of baggage. And that's actually, where a lot of emotional release was needed. It's not as
Yeah.
if I worked with the parent, I worked with the client.
Hmm.
And literally, and this is the beauty of hypnotherapy, by the way, maybe, subconscious work and subconscious reprogramming and emotional release. 2 sessions later, like I'm having 1 hour long conversations with my parent and I'm enjoying them, going
Wow.
from radio silence to this. Why? Because there was so much backlog of undigested emotions and baggage that you've been keeping in your body, in your mind, that you can't even speak to the person properly without all of
Okay.
that mental chatter. And
Hmm.
now you've done this session on yourself, and it just goes to show how much power and agency we have. We think that a relationship, will only change if both of us are working on it, and they have to change, and I have to change, and only then. No, you just changed your mindset. You just released all of that toxicity from within you. And here you are, you can actually have a conversation and have a good time
Hmm.
reconnecting, catching up.
That's
So,
interesting. Wow.
yeah,
Is that purely based on just releasing those emotions? Or is there, I mean, when I say releasing your emotions, what I'm hearing when you say releasing what I'm hearing is that just talking about them. Is that what it
no,
is? Or is it more than that? Just that?
it's more than that, and it's not just talking. So in this case, for example, and in my experience, I've found in a lot of cases to get much faster results and to go through that journey in lesser time and in also in a more effective and efficient manner. Hypnotherapy is something that's been really, really effective. And what hypnotherapy basically is, I'll just tell you in a nutshell,
Yeah.
is subconscious reprogramming
Hmm.
and subconscious release. And it's basically done through relaxation and guided imagery. And as you go through that guided imagery, you're not necessarily like the way you and me are talking about it. Right now, we're in this conversation, you and me, Zaib, are only using 10% of our minds, which is our conscious mind.
Hmm.
90%, 80 to 90% of our mind is subconscious. And that's what calls the shots of how we feel when we get triggered, when we have these unprocessed and undigested emotions, this baggage, all of that is there. And that's why we tend to self-sabotage, procrastinate, react in a way that we don't feel good about later, say things we didn't mean, and the list goes on. You get the gist,
Right.
right? And hypnotherapy is amazing in the fact that it allows you to do therapy in the state of hypnosis, which is basically accessing your subconscious mind. So
So
it's
you're like
making that
passed
change
out?
actually.
What
No,
are you?
no, no, no. You are awake, you are aware, you're in control, your eyes are closed. You're able to open them whenever you want, but mostly you don't feel like. Usually in my sessions, I think in the end I have to tell them, like, I have to like kind of bring them out. Okay,
Hey,
then they're
time's up.
awake. Yeah, they're don't want to get out because it's just such a beautiful and relaxing and healing process. So you're
Wow.
not passed out, but if I were to give you a very quick analogy, like, metaphor for it, just
Hmm.
imagine if there's like a circle, which is your brain. The top 10% is your conscious mind, 10 to 20%, bottom huge part, subconscious mind calling the shots.
Right.
So only change, like the change that you want to make within yourself is only possible if both your conscious and subconscious are on the same page.
Hmm.
Hypnotherapy allows you to do that because consciously I'm going to tell myself I'm going to start working out or eating healthy from Monday morning, or
Hmm.
I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to stop nail biting, or I'm
Hmm.
going to whatever it is, whatever the goal
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
Consciously,
yeah.
but subconsciously, if it's not aligned, you're not going to be able to do it, or it'll be extremely like it'll be a one off. You'll go one day and then you'll be like, this isn't for me, right?
Right, right.
So, what happens is that in between these two parts of your mind, just imagine like a bouncer, a bouncer of a club, like
Yeah, 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 I
standing
know.
there, not
Yeah,
allowing you in. Okay.
yeah.
In hypnotherapy, you basically, tell that bouncer to relax, maybe have a glass of water or something. He allows you to go into the subconscious. He's sitting there, he's not passed out, nothing. He's
Hmm.
there, he's alert, but he's given you access willingly and openly to enter your subconscious, to understand what's happening there. to understand the root cause or the genesis of your challenge, if
Interesting.
that's necessary, and then to reprogram and create new neural pathways in your mind. Okay, you want to stop nail biting or you want to feel less anxious in social situations? Let's create a new neural pathway. But first, let's get rid of all that baggage and all of that
Mm,
undigested stuff. Let's get rid
right.
of that and release it, not so that you forget it, but so that it becomes a mere memory to you, right? So which
Okay.
doesn't like elicit so many heightened emotions within you. So you don't get triggered
Triggered.
about
Right.
it. Yeah. So you're
Right.
no longer getting triggered. You still remember everything, but now you're working on a new neural pathway and reinforcing that of, okay, now I feel more confident when I'm giving a presentation, or now I'm feeling more confident when I'm meeting new people or networking, going for coffee chats. So
Interesting.
yeah, that's what it is in a nutshell.
Is it as easy as you just described it is, or is it?
Of course not. This has been
I
a
mean,
year, like the training is over a year long.
mhm.
It's very, very technical.
but the
Um,
but the procedure is what I meant. That the whole subconscious and entering and all of that. You know, almost reprogramming your mind. Is that? I'm just wondering how is that consistent for completely different people? Like, how can the same solution be used for?
it's not the same. It varies
Okay.
from person to person,
Okay.
personality to personality, issue to issue. Which is
Okay.
why, like, before I work, like in terms of hypnotherapy, before I work with any client, I have like an extensive, it's an hour, maybe an hour and a half long
Hmm.
session, although it's supposed to be an hour, but I let it go,
Hmm.
where we go into their entire, like, family history, like stages of life, everything. Okay.
Hmm.
Whatever they'd like to share. They don't need to share everything, of course, but
True.
like
True.
I basically create an entire blueprint of their
Hmm.
lives.
Hmm.
Also understand how their brain processes information and
Yeah.
data, based on which I will take them through guided imagery accordingly. So it's not a
Okay.
one size fits all. It varies from person to person.
But the process is the same. I mean, I know the ways to get to the ends is perhaps different
The
for
process
people.
changes
Oh,
based on the
process
kind of
changes.
person
Okay.
it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
It does.
interesting. Wow. Wow. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that hypnotherapy kind of thing that really blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. That was really good. I want to, explore that for sure. Um, well, I know we're a little bit of over an hour, and I want to be mindful of your
Yeah.
time as well. And this was again a fantastic conversation. I enjoyed it and learned so much about this whole, you know, the work that you do, the challenges that you face, and you almost kind of like resolve them as well. And I hope people listening to it can explore this because you don't have to show up at the mechanic with an absolutely broken car. You can go there if even if it's like just showing that a little bit of signs of being a little unfit. So don't wait until you have your four arteries blocked before you get a heart operation. So I hope that people take that out of it, because it's not like I don't want people to think, because I'm almost hearing people, might say that, oh, okay, yeah, this sounds great, but maybe I'm not there yet. I'm okay right now. I think that's again what you said. The first step of, there are issues, unresolved emotions.
Hmm.
Barely if you're an expat, that's BS if someone tells me that they don't have any unresolved memories or emotions, because that's how we grow up.
Yeah.
Um, although I don't know about Islamabad that much. I mean, I'm a Karachi guy, so we have our bit challenges. I'm sure Islamabad is slightly
Oh
different,
yeah.
um,
It's
in a
all the
good
same.
way.
It's all
um,
the same.
yeah, I'm sure, but yeah, I just want people to, I mean, to explore this. I'll put your handles and your website on the description, in the description as well, and it's going to be floating up in front of you as well. Do give her a follow, reach out to her, explore what works for you. She's the expert. She's going to help you navigate through what you need. um, you don't have to figure. I think one thing as well I want to be really clear on is that it's not on you, I'm assuming, to figure it out. It's on the expert to then help you figure it out. It's not like you're not going into a coaching discussion with the pressure that you need to know all the answers. It's the other person who needs to do that work. I'm assuming that's the way. Obviously it's going to be
100%.
a two-way street, but don't go thinking that I need to really come up with a solution. It's the other person's job. That's why you're going to an expert. So any parting words, anything you want to add to that before we conclude?
No, I mean, thank you so much for having me here, Zaib. This was an amazing discussion. I think we could easily go on for
Oh
another
yeah, yeah, yeah.
hour, but of
I'm
course,
sure.
you know, life. But no, I think I just echo what you said. You don't need to wait for things to get really bad, number
Mhm.
one. Number two is, I don't think we spoke about this a lot, but I'll just leave it as one of my parting thoughts as well, is that coaching, just the way you have coaches for sports teams, you have them for the
Mm,
best players and you have them for the worst players. So seeking support, be it coaching or be it any other kind of support, does not
right.
say anything negative about you. In fact, it actually says positive things about you because it means you're taking your life, your goals, yourself, and your relationships
Hmm.
seriously. And that's what
True.
we need to do because we get one shot at this life. So
Hmm.
don't shy away and trust the process and trust your gut and reach out to whoever it is that you feel called towards reaching out to. Because believe me, it can make a huge difference. Yeah.
100%. Couldn't have said it better. Appreciate your time again, Zarina. This has been great. You were really gracious with your expertise and your time. We will definitely be in touch, and I hope to have you back again sometimes down the line as well to really further explore. As you said, there's so much that that can be discussed, and like we're only like scratching the surface here. I'm sure in terms of
Oh, yeah.
experiences of an expat. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll be back with another one. Cheers. Thank you very much.